All right, thank you everyone for joining us tonight for our plenary panel, Young Feminists at the Intersections. I'm your Vice President Membership, Chitra Punjabi, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this evening. I'd like to take just a few moments to introduce our panel and thank you all for being here. And just a quick note, unfortunately two of our panelists, Sandra Kim and Isha Pandit, were not able to join us tonight, but we still have these wonderful women joining us today, and I think we are going to have a great conversation, and so I'm really looking forward to our discussion. So tonight we're going to be talking about the ideas of intersectionality, online and offline feminist activism, and how we can continue to use both of those mediums to achieve our feminist goals, and encouraging young leadership in feminists in our various organizations and in NOW especially. So today with us we have Janae Ingram, Atima Omara, and Isha Punja. So first I'd like to introduce Janae. Janae is the acting National Executive Director of the National Action Network and oversees their action agenda and legislative advocacy work and works directly with the National Action Network's founder and president, Reverend Al Sharpton. In her role, she focuses on issues including criminal justice, education, housing, technology, economic development, healthcare, and especially this year, voting rights. Very important. Janae's been with the organization for over 2 years and has previously served as the Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief and has been working on Stand Your Ground issues, voter engagement, and most recently the National Action to Realize the Dream rally and march in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. She's a recognized voice on politics and activism and has a regular column on Loop 21 and has a weekly segment on the syndicated radio show Keeping It Real with Reverend Al Sharpton, and also appears on media such as MSNBC, TV One, The Huffington Post, and thegrio.com. Thank you for joining us, Janae. Atima is a recognized leader and speaker on engaging youth, women, and people of color, and she's also the first African-American woman president of the National Young Democrats of America. And that's actually the first in YDA's 82-year history, so an incredible achievement, Atima. She oversees day-to-day operations, fundraising, strategic planning, and the organization has over 150,000 members and over 2,300 local chapters. And as president, she also sits on the DNC's executive committee and serves as the secretary of the DNC's Youth Council. She's worked for over a decade in democratic and progressive politics and has worked on several federal, state, local campaigns, including then Governor Mark Warner's gubernatorial campaign in Virginia. Atima is also prolific with her writing, especially on Huffington Post, but also has columns and articles in Ms., RH Reality Check, Fem 2.0, and has contributed to the Shriver Report as well. I actually know Atima through my work with the Women's Information Network in DC, where she served as the advisory council. And of course, Atima has also been very involved with NOW as well, serving on the state board in Virginia now, and also was one of the founding members of the National Young Feminist Task Force. So Atima, thank you for joining us today. And it's my real pleasure to introduce probably one of the youngest NOW leaders that I know of, Isha Punja, who is the president of her NOW High School Club in Orange County. Isha just completed her junior year, right? That's correct. She just finished her finals yesterday, so she's a real trooper for being here. And she also works as a teen coordinator for the NOW Orange County High School Club, so she actually works to help facilitate other clubs, NOW high school clubs, get set up in the county, which is amazing. Thank you for your work there, Isha. Isha's a runner. She actually helped her school place 5th in the state championships. She's an honor student with a 3.9 GPA and has some really great plans to be a doctor or a lawyer. Yep, and she wants to inspire other young women to believe in themselves and dream big. So Isha, thank you for joining us today. You guys got your notes? All right, so we're going to start our discussion with a little bit of intersectionality and what that means to young feminists. You know, we've seen a lot about the discussion of intersectionality over the last couple of years, especially across social media and on blogs, as we've seen the advent of online feminism. And it's interesting to me that intersectionality sort of seems to be this natural place that a lot of young feminists come from when approaching their feminist activism. So, you know, let's start off and say, why is intersectionality important to you as an activist? Janae, do you want to?
Sure, I'll jump right in.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, I've written about intersectionality. I think it just is intrinsic almost, because for me specifically, I'm a black person, but I'm also a woman, and I'm equally those things. I'm neither more one than the other. So when I think about my rights and the issues that I face, I think about them sort of in a holistic perspective. It's not that I'm facing, you know, these. Sure. Up here? Okay. Mic lesson 101. But if I think about the challenges and the things that I want to see for my future, those things are coming from both perspectives. So I think that's why it's just something that is really intrinsic to who we are as women today.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think for me specifically, not only being a black person and a woman, but also, you know, having two parents that are immigrants and very much growing up in that sort of household and how that shapes you, and knowing, you know, very much tying. I think we also sort of look to sort of understand ourselves as women from our mothers, and in you know, my case, you know, my mother was this immigrant, you know, this girl who grew up in a village in the 40s, and thought to herself that she wanted an education instead of getting married at 15, and talked my grandfather into, you know, using her dowry to pay for her education. You know, she didn't, you know, if she would have read The Feminine Mystique, it wouldn't have made any sense to her. Mm-hmm. But she knew very much that she deserved rights and an ability to have an education to choose her own life and not just to limit it to being a farmer's wife. So, you know, and her way of raising me was to make me understand sort of my options. And so, you know, I came to feminism very naturally because of that. But I think it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me until I started reading the works of, you know, Bell Hooks and Angela Davis and others, talking certainly about the struggles of reproductive justice, that it wasn't just about, you know, the right to choose, but sort of the right to raise a family the way you want to raise family, to give birth the way you choose to give birth, to be able to raise that family as healthily as possible. So, as an example. So, yeah.
I think that intersectionality, here.
Yeah, up there.
I think that intersectionality plays out a lot in high school. So as an Indian American, I feel like I face a couple more layers of prejudice than maybe just the average, like, you know, white girl at my school. So in the social kind of atmosphere at my school, I feel like it's a lot harder for Indians and Asian girls to kind of, like, for example, I'm a junior in high school this year, and I still haven't gotten like a prom date or a formal date, and I'm in so many different things, you know. I'm in cross country and track, and I'm in the club, and I meet a lot of different people in all of my different classes, but I still feel like maybe the average, like, kind of like blonde cheerleader might have more of a string of guys, you know, approaching her. So I feel like it's harder to gain acceptance and respect for maybe people of different ethnicities. And in terms of the sexism at my school, I think it's hard for girls to kind of gain respect from their male counterparts sometimes in some of the classes. Like in some of my classes, you know, I had one of my friends, actually, I was talking to him, and he was really surprised that I was taking AP Chemistry. He was like, oh, you're taking it? But, you know, like, you're a girl, like, you're taking this class, you know? So I still feel like there's cultural a little bit of like maybe cultural racism and sexism at the high school level that still exists.
Great, thank you. So, it sounds like intersectionality is sort of core to who we are as people, and I think that we're hearing that in all of our respective backgrounds. So how does that drive our activism? How did that either influence your work, Janae, or bring you to where you are today and what you're doing with the National Action Network? Is that something you keep sort of at the forefront of your mind? How does it inform you on a daily basis?
I definitely think it informs me. I know as soon as I came in, I immediately, and I wasn't even, I was new and sort of looking at the work that we were doing and felt like there wasn't as much focus on women's issues, which to me was a huge issue. Because how can we be fighting for civil rights and not thinking about just, and obviously it's coming from me and my personal experience because I'm a woman. I'm like, well, we need civil rights, but we also need women's rights. Why don't we have both? So there is that sort of, perspective for me personally that goes into my work of thinking about how do we achieve rights on both fronts and not necessarily thinking about them as separate things, but almost thinking about it as a joint sort of working in tandem.
I think certainly my work and how it sort of applies to me, I think I'll speak very much in the mindset of being sort of a president of Young Dems. I get to deal with guys in what I do. So it's interesting because there's the job of empowering other young women leaders to get more involved in politics and the political process because from our ranks historically Jim Clyburn was a South Carolina Young Dem. He became best friends actually with Steny Hoyer when he was involved in Maryland at the same time at the Young Dems. So a lot of Democratic leaders have come from our ranks and have gone to Congress and have become governors and such. And so I really view it as a way to get more young women politically involved and a way to sort of educate our young men. And I realize that's very much just part and parcel of my role because, people do notice. Like I go to events like this, and a lot of more African American women are more interested in being engaged in politics, so they see me on the stage talking about being involved in politics. And so I have to think about intersectionality when I think about recruiting. And there was this great poll, I think Ms. did it, or maybe Feminist Majority, where they identified that the largest population of women polled across the generations that identified as feminists were 61% women 18 to 30, which is great news.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So you have that. You've got a millennial generation that about like 1 in I think 6 or so are identify as some sort of person of color, like whether they're mixed or whether they're fully one thing or other. So I think intersectionality is going to be very important to any sort of activism moving forward because people are going to view themselves as not one or the other, but made up of all of these things, and then not even counting the gender orientation, sexual orientation, the class difference as well, and how that informs their experience. So it's very crucial in the work that I do to recruit people in politics and in my organizing work. Yeah.
Well, I think that it's kind of, intersectionality has kind of taught me that young feminists, well, kind of showed me that young feminists tend to define feminism a little bit more narrowly. Like, and I kind of saw this play out a little bit in my club. One time we had a speaker come in and talk, and she was a Muslim woman who was coming and talking about her fashion designing business that she started, and her name was Nadia Rayan, and we got her through a board member who was a relative of hers, and she was supposed to come in and talk about her designs and her dresses, and they were very conservative in that they had high necklines and like long sleeves, but they didn't have anything like headscarves or anything, so she was supposed to come in and talk about the struggle she faced as being a woman and starting a business, and also as being as how her Muslim faith tied into her designs, and why she didn't really incorporate the headscarf into her designs. But when she actually came and talked, she didn't mention anything about her faith or the headscarf, and she only used words like conservative and modest, but she didn't bring her faith into it. So a lot of the girls were kind of confused after the meeting, and they came to me and they said, "Oh, that was a really great meeting, but how come she didn't talk about, how come she didn't talk about designs that were a little bit more, or a little less conservative? How come all of her dresses were so conservative and so covered up?" Because they didn't know the reason why. So I asked the board member who brought her in, how come she didn't talk about what we mentioned? And she said, "Oh, she didn't talk about it because she didn't think that bringing up her Muslim faith would really go well with, a feminist club, and that feminist people would kind of see her as maybe not truly a feminist if she's still conforming to some, system of covering up, or like some Muslim system." So I kind of think, that's when I realized, like, here's a woman who's dealing with many layers of prejudice, like she's dealing with the sexism that comes with being a woman and starting a business. She's also dealing with, she's coming to a feminist place, and she feels the need to suppress her religious side. So I think that we need to kind of broaden our definition of feminism to and be more inclusive of all people, and that's what we try to do with our club. And that's why we even have things like the Love Your Body poster contest. I think that we should kind of make it more like love yourself, like love where you come from, your religion, your background, and everything. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So actually that's a really great, jumping off point into the discussion about feminism that we're seeing that's changed. There's two perspectives to it. There's certainly the outside perspective of how people frame feminism from an external perspective, but there's also the perspective of us who work within the movement and who are seeing feminism in different ways, applying intersectionality to our activism and our feminism, and how we're defining that. So to you, what does it mean to be a feminist today? And how do you incorporate that?
I would say, I think ultimately, I'm going to try to get this right one of these times. I'm going to say, I think ultimately, feminism is about equality and women being able to have the power and the decisions, make the decisions for themselves, and not be dictated to by men what the rules are, or how to play, or where we can, how far we can go. I think that's what it means to me. And so for me, in terms of the work, again, I think it's really just about looking at the issues. Obviously, I work in a civil rights organization, which historically has been male-dominated, and it's a big part of the reason why in the 50s and 60s you had women who weren't allowed to sort of be out front, because, the men of the movement didn't want the women's issues to sort of overarch or, somehow trump the civil rights issues or the issues for justice for blacks. And I think some of that still persists today. I think it's gotten better. Obviously, I sit, at the head of this organization, and I sit with lots of other women who are heading civil rights organizations. So there is that sort of broadening of seeing women at the top. But I still do think that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of addressing sort of this male perception that, it's a man's game. And, interestingly enough, I'll sit at some of these meetings, and it's almost like unsaid, but they don't expect you to say anything. And I don't operate by those rules. So I say I'm going to make my voice heard. And I know a lot of the women who I work with do the same thing. And, we'll have the conversation afterwards like, yeah, the guys, they wanted to be at the table and make it like a boys' table, and we're just there to look, to show that there's diversity. But we have to ultimately make sure that there is that diversity, that our voices are being heard, and that our issues are being lifted up, and it's not just a conversation about someone else's agenda. And as we think about intersectionality, realizing that my agenda can be their agenda, but my agenda is also my agenda. And I have to make sure that all of those things get lifted up.
Yeah, and I think very well said. I think ditto on a lot of parts of it, but I think that I think, you know, yes, I mean, for me, being a feminist, it's all about the equality part. It's about, you know, it's funny. It's definitely, I don't want to say lean in, because I feel like that word has been so overused, but I think it's very much about, it's equality, it's justice, but it's also about not only getting there as a woman and being successful, but also sort of building a community where you're helping other women to do the same. Because, you know, I'm sure we all know some woman in here would probably call herself a feminist, but the moment she has to help out another woman, under the bus. You know, and so, yeah, and I see that quite a lot in my line of work in politics. So I think also when it comes to me sitting at the table at the Democratic Party, you know, I'll say, you know, in this room, like, we've all had our frustrations, sort of, definitely, with things that certain, you know, electeds have done, sometimes policies that, you know, the party felt were necessary. I was, you know, certainly a person who was frustrated with, you know, the ACA, and that I was very thrilled that it was passing and there were so many great things in there. But then, you know, we have the Stupak Amendment and I'm like throwing stuff at my computer, right? So that's very frustrating. But I have so many of my friends who ask me, like, why I do what I do. I'm like, because I don't want to be on the menu. I don't want other women to be on the menu if I'm not at the table. You know, the conversations are very different when the Black woman is in the room, who can lend, you know, a lot of credibility to the stories of other African Americans and their experiences, to other women and their experiences. And it's interesting because even within sort of the party ranks of men and women, specifically men who think that they are great allies, but there's still a lot that they don't know, right? There's still a lot that they don't know. And I'll give you an example of a conversation I had recently with a colleague who said he was talking to another guy that I work with, and he was referring to another woman that we work with, and he referred to her as big titties. Pardon the phrase, right? Yeah, referred to her as that, right? And he said, oh no, big titties, right? And so I said, what did you say to him when he said that? And he was like, well, I didn't say anything. And I was like, why did you not say anything? Like, right? Like, he would never say that in front of me because he knew I'd rip his head off. But like, why, why did you not say anything? I said, and so he got very defensive and he got very upset, and so it came out that he felt bad about it because he realized he should have said something about it, but that he didn't, right? And I said, like, I can do the work, but like, you guys are gonna be very responsible for educating other men in a credible way about ending sexism, right? So he went back and had the conversation with him, and he was like, well, the first conversation I had with her, the guy got defensive, was we were having a conversation over bourbon, and she was talking about guys and their body parts or whatever. She still didn't call you big cock. Like, that's what I said. Tell him that. So I have a lot of guys who work for me. So I'm like president, and I've got like, you know, chief of staff who's a guy who's like a straight Italian Catholic male from Pittsburgh. And, you know, I have these conversations with him, and I have conversations with all the male colleagues that I work with, and I find that as my role, and I'm okay with that, but I'm like trying to educate them to educate each other, because I'm like, I cannot be doing the work for you. Like, you cannot call me every time you have a question about feminism, right? So that is the role that I see myself at and doing all the time. It's like, I need you to teach each other. Right. Keep me out of this equation. That is how the movement will spread. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think that feminism is really, really needed or necessary at the high school level, because you would be surprised at how much, I call it low-key sexism. Is this mic working? Okay. Yeah. You'd be surprised at how much like low-key sexism exists in high school. And when I first started now, I actually wasn't even aware of how much sexism there was at the high school level, and I was doing it because I was kind of inspired by like, you know, like the pioneers of the feminist movement, like Betty Friedan, and I just wanted to kind of continue that. But I didn't realize how much work we had to do in our own kind of community. So when I first started the club, people were like, why are you starting this club? I mean, women are equal to men, you know, maybe in other countries they're not, maybe in olden days they weren't, but now I think in present day, 2013, we're fine, you know? If you want to be successful, even a couple weeks ago, my friend's mom was like, if you want to be successful as a female, you can be. So there's nothing holding you back, you know? And I can see their point, but there was one specific instance that really showed me that we have a lot of work to do, and this was the 1 Billion Rising campaign that we had at our school. Basically, we're trying to bring awareness to the fact that 1 billion women in the world have been assaulted, and just kind of bring, like, because I don't think high schoolers really understand that, you know, and we were trying to kind of educate them about that. So what we did was we did a poster campaign, and we took pictures of just different people from our school holding signs that said things like, I refuse to be a statistic, or, you know, like we should all respect women and do not abuse women, things like that. And when we first approached people asking them to hold up the signs, a lot of girls said yes, they'll do it, and a lot of guys said yes, they do it too, but then their friends would come in the background and like do funny things or whatever, and that seemed completely normal. But the most amount of like resistance, I guess, to this that I saw was after we finished putting up the posters around the school, and this was surprisingly both from guys and girls. When we put up posters around school, sometimes we heard girls walking by saying like, why would they bring this up? Like, why talk about this? It's just so weird to bring here. Like, some people would say like, oh, I doubt that's even true. That's completely impossible. Like, why? Like, that's obviously like a fake statistic, you know? And guys were also really like resistant towards it. Like, one guy actually agreed to be on the poster. He said he would be on it. We took the picture and we printed it out and we were ready to put it up on the wall. And then somebody comes up to me and they said, did you see his tweet? And I was like, wait, what do you mean? And I didn't have a Twitter, so I had my friend go on Twitter, and she saw his tweet, and basically he wrote like, oh, I'm so confused. Some women's rights activists came up to me and asked me to take some picture for them and like pledge to never hit a woman, #okay, or # weird or something. And after seeing that, I was like, you know, he doesn't really buy into it. And yes, we wanted to show, the reason we had him was we wanted to show that guys support it too, but after seeing that, I was like, well, he obviously doesn't, so we just tore down his poster. So, you know, and that's when I really kind of understood at a deeper level why we're having this club at this level. Because I think sexism starts kind of here at the high school level. And that's when I realized that we had a lot of work to do. You know, we have to create awareness, and we have to also deal with like the resistance that people have to people who are aware of it but don't want to change it. So yeah.
Absolutely. I mean that. You know, I think something you all touched upon is the fact that education is really a huge part of the work that we're doing in our, you know, respective organizations, and that there's a long way for us to go still in many regards. Especially in having leadership. You know, you're all leaders here, but I'm sort of hearing a very similar theme that you're just one of very, very few women at the table, or, you know, you're one of few women that aren't really taken seriously in your environment. So how do we encourage more young feminists to become leaders? How do we build that pipeline? How do we talk to young women and those young men as well who are allies who want to help us spread that message? What should we do to encourage them, and what are you doing in your respective organizations as well to do that?
So, interesting, because I was having a flashback to high school. Unpleasant, as it is. But I remembered, and I was thinking about it because I was at the makers, folks who've done all the documentaries on sort of the history of the women's movement, and I attended a bit of their conference and met the little girl who was playing football, Little League, and she was the only girl on her team, and her father brought her. And what really moved me was not the fact that she was knocking down all these boys, and all the parents were frustrated because you're getting beaten by a girl, is what they were all like yelling at their kids. And you know, he was saying, the father was just saying very eloquently, and the mother had died, so he was raising her, and he said, you know, we really, really underestimate the ability of girls, and that's a damaging thing. She said she wanted to do this, and why not, right? And so I thought about it in regards to when I was in high school, we would play sports in gym, and the gym teacher was a guy who would always end up separating the guys and the girls because the guys would play, but they would only toss the ball to each other. They would just never toss it to us, right? So he would just separate us, so we would just play amongst, our respective genders. So finally at one point, I think he just got mad and was like, boys, throw the frickin' football to a girl already. And one of them saw me, I guess, because they got yelled at enough and they were tired of it. They finally tossed it at me, and luckily I was one of the few girls that could catch. So I was all the pressure of my gender on me, and I caught it. I was just so thrilled.
You caught that football, Atima.
Yeah, I was hold the ball, got the ball. And so, I think it's that partly. I think it's teachers just saying, look, I'm going to start calling on all the girls in the class. I'm going to encourage them to speak up. I'm going to encourage them to get involved in sports regardless of their gender. I'm going to, encourage them to run for student council. I'm going to step out of my sort of whatever. I almost feel like it is part of your role as a student principal, a teacher, or whatever, because it really does start not only just in high school, but certainly in the home. There's a study that Women in Politics Institute came out with that said that the girls who are more, you have to ask women 7 times, obviously, what you think about running for office, but that women who are more inclined to think about it are women who've done some sort of competitive thing, whether it's run for student council or playing competitive sports, because they're okay with competition. They're saying, it's not an unfeminine thing to be competitive. And that's sort of ingrained in them early, and so they don't have any sort of qualms about running for office later. That's not part of the equation for them. So I think it's very much encouraging women in all aspects of their life to step up and compete, and to be a part of the process. I was the annoying girl who always raised my hand in class, all the time. And a couple times the boys would whine, and my teacher was like, shut up. She was this great, actually South Asian, woman who was like, shut up, guys, whatever. She's asking a question. And I think one teacher, she said, when somebody said, Tima always talks too much, she's like, well, she has a B+ and you have a what? Sorry? So I think it's always good when those older folks who set those examples for young people.
I think ultimately seeing other young women, obviously seeing older women who have been in the movement for a while helps. But I think it's really when they see younger women who are in the movement, who are doing it. For us, a lot of our youth are women. I'm not surprised by it at all. I mean, I'm sure that someone is, but I'm not. I think we're born leaders, and whatever. I think when we have our young people go out and speak, one of the things that I hear a lot from young women is that they want to do something, they want to be active, they want to make change, but they either don't know how to do it or they don't feel like they can. And it's not necessarily because someone's telling them that they can't. They just, I don't know. It's a variety of reasons. But when they see another young woman sort of out front and leading and making change, it becomes an inspiration for them to say, oh, she's doing it, she's my age or in my age group, I can do it too. And so I think it's important for us to lift up other young feminists and say, here's a shining example of someone who's doing it, and you can do it too.
Thank you. Well, I think that in the younger ages, like elementary school through, well, I've observed elementary school through middle school, girls are right up there with guys, competing for the same position in all these leadership things. But I think maybe after that, in high school-ish is kind of, or maybe later middle school, 8th grade onwards, girls, for some reason, kind of get a little intimidated, I think, or tend to shy away from the top position. I have a friend who she ran for president and against another girl of my school, and it was her and another girl running, and she won. And she did a great job throughout the whole year. Everybody loved her. And the next year, she's like, oh yeah, vote for me for vice president. I was like, oh, why aren't you running for president anymore? And she never really told me a reason why, but it happened to be that like that year, the year afterwards, there was like two really like alpha male, you know, football type guys running. And I think that it might have had kind of a role in it. So I think our club, what we try to do in the Now Club at our school is just kind of create or promote leadership at a smaller level. Like I have 10 board members and I'm the president, and last year I was running every single meeting and they were just sitting and watching, and I was like, they're not really doing anything. Like they should present, they should not just plan the meetings, but they should actually talk. And now what they do is we switch off, so every kind of meeting they step up and they talk about issues they want to, you know, they'll say, I like to this issue, I think this is important for us to bring up, and they'll bring it up. And even as a in the OC now, you know, at the Now conferences, the Orange County Conference, I'm the team coordinator, so I'll talk to a lot of young girls there, and they all seem really interested in starting clubs at their school, and I kind of help them with the basic like initial phases of starting a club, because I think from there, then you kind of grow to be a leader a little bit. But in the beginning, like you can easily just, something wrong happens, like, oh, you have your first meeting and no one shows up, or you don't know what to do, you know, you kind of tend to like back down or get a little insecure, or, you know. And I think it's really important that we do this more at a national level, because I think that Now is really good about you know, promoting empowerment, and I think empowerment also leads to leadership, because empowerment leads to confidence, right? And then from there you can be a leader. So I think if you have more, you know, Now high school clubs throughout America, you know, like all across the nation, I think like that will really help create leadership amongst young girls at a more national level.
So changing tactic a little bit, but you know, talking still about leadership, we've seen an advent of women's voices online, especially on Twitter. You know, Black women are one of the fastest growing users of Twitter and voices on Twitter, and so we're seeing a lot of feminist activism in that online space. You know, when Michelle Obama retweeted the Bring Back Our Girls tweet, or when she tweeted the Bring Back Our Girls hashtag, and that was probably one of the most retweeted tweets of all time. So we are seeing change happen online. How are we going to harness that to work both, you know, in that online space and that offline space, so we can achieve our feminist goals? And, you know, are there programs that you're working on that encompass both of those areas? You want to start?
Okay, so I recently, we have a Now group basically, and recently this girl posted an article that basically talked about how women earn only 77 cents for every dollar a man earns. So, and a guy commented on that saying, yeah, but that's because you guys choose to do things like makeup artists and, you know, like hairstylists, while we want to be like lawyers and doctors. So naturally, like the things that we aspire for earn more money. And it was so incredibly sexist, but you know, I mean, it wasn't unexpected for me, because this is something I hear constantly, so I wasn't like completely blown away. I was expecting something like that. But I think that social media really allows it, like an issue to be brought into the mainstream, because a guy like that would probably not have even like he wouldn't have even heard about that before, you know, like he wouldn't have even known that before, and at least now he heard about it. And I had a chance to quickly search up like statistics on this, and then I found this Washington Post article that basically talked about that basically said that even women when they're in their same job with men, you know, in a law firm, for example, two lawyers, the guy not only earns more money, but also has more of a chance of becoming a partner than the female lawyer will. And so I linked that, and that got a lot of likes. I was happy about that. So yeah, and I think it just basically brings this issue into the mainstream, and it actually, people, when they see something really interesting or, again, controversial or whatever on social media, they will actually talk about that outside too. Because at a track meet then later on that week, this group of guys comes up to me and then they start bringing it up, talking about it with me. And, at the end of the day, maybe they might go away thinking, not agreeing with what I have to say. But I think that social media is good because at least, Did you say something?
I'm agreeing with you. I'm like, at least they're having the conversation.
Yeah, at least the conversation is happening. And this is not just to bring the issue to guys, but to even girls who don't agree with it or don't, sometimes girls will even say makeup artists, you guys, a big argument that a lot of people have is, but women take off more time for babies or whatever, and that's why they earn less. They'll just come up with different excuses, and I think that it's really important. Social media is a really big factor or a really big thing in bringing all of these issues together into the mainstream, so we can discuss it all as a group. So,
Absolutely.
Is it true?
Thank you.
Who wants to follow that, right? I'm going to keep letting her go last from now on. I think with social media, one of the great things, and we started having this conversation in the speaker room, is that it sort of serves as an alarm. So in ways that we couldn't get messages across or let people know about certain things that were happening and how they were happening, what we could do, we're now able to communicate in a matter of seconds. Like, you can tweet out something, or you can put something on Instagram or something on Facebook, and immediately anyone looking at your profile will see those things, and you can have the conversation, but you can also drive people to action. Here's what's next. Here's how you respond. Here's what you do. It's something that we use a lot. Whenever there's an issue, one of the first things we'll do is talk about, let's do a Twitter town hall or a Twitter rally, or something to sort of elevate the issue and get people talking about it, because social media is so widely used. And even though there's a lot of, there's a lot out there, that's not necessarily important, I think a lot of times if you can get people to start talking about something and weighing in, it sort of creates and elevates that buzz.
Yeah, so definitely leading an organization that's youth-focused social media is a very big part of everything that we do. I guess a couple of examples, was when we were congratulating Alison Lundergan-Grimes on her, being a candidate and running against Mitch McConnell, and that engaged over close to 1,000 people on our Facebook page, and tweeting at us and whatnot, because just the idea of this young woman, and she's rather young, she's in her early 30s, running against Mitch McConnell, and she's got a very good shot of taking him out. She's been endorsed by Emily's List, and who could defeat this guy, is huge, because he's sort of, this devil out there who's not great on any of the issues that we care about. And so that we try to find ways to engage people that way. A lot of times I'll use certainly my role and having a very active Twitter presence separately just from the YDA account to just talk about issues, knowing the role that I have. Like, my predecessor was very involved in sort of the agricultural community, and came out toward the end of his term as gay, and so he used to be sort of an advocate on evangelical Christianity and being gay and what that means. In my capacity, it's about being an African American, a woman, and learning what that means, sort of being involved in politics. So the last couple things that I had been very involved in Twitter campaigns was certainly Bring Back Our Girls. And as somebody who has two parents who are from Africa, and understanding my family is not too far where they are in Uganda from where the Lord's Resistance Army was, so lots of kidnappings nearby in villages, and so that was a very personal sort of thing to me for being involved. And so I had somebody who actually sort of questioned the use of that activism, and I said, I don't know, and I think it was just recently read that the Nigerian government's kind of given up looking for these girls, and I said, what, the fact that we got it to the point that the U.S. government paid attention to it, that a lot of westernized countries paid attention to it, when it just would have been another kidnapping on another day, and that it started from these families who were very outraged about it, is a big thing. Did it end up in the result of them coming home? now, and that still yet remains to be seen. But the fact that people knew about it and that it's a problem and that it's sort of a threat. I honestly think that anytime any nation is trying to oppress women, it is just a threat to national security. Like, you're threatening half of the population, you're not educating half of the population. When women are allowed to be educated and to thrive, societies just do better. Like, Afghanistan was a very thriving society before the Taliban took over. That was one. Another one was the Yes All Women. I actually got kind of in trouble for that because I tweeted out a graphic of the number of women who have died from domestic violence was higher than those who died in 9/11 and the last Afghanistan and Iraq wars. And it was a graphic that I found. I tweeted that out. I got like 3,000 retweets on that. Wow. And the number of trolls that came out of nowhere, like, on this particular issue, saying, like, you're skewing statistics. Like, what are the numbers for men who, have been assaulted? And why are you trying to insult veterans? Where the heck is this? Am I insulting veterans? And I mean, it was, fun for me because I'm like, block. But I just kept repeating like a stat. I was just like, 1 in 4, women are assaulted, and 1 in, I can't even remember now the stat that I used for men. Oh my goodness. Are assaulted. And the point is not to say that what's happening to what happened on 9/11 was not horrible, that what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan is not horrible. The graphic is supposed to educate you to the fact that there is no outrage and no mobilization around the fact that these women have been, murdered by their partners, but there is a ton of outrage about the other 3 things in this graphic. Like, that's what I'm trying to wake you up about. And clearly you're responding to it, so you're awake about it. So there was that. And then there was the Restore the Block, which I only bring up because when you're a woman who's active online, there's obviously, you're going to get stalked, you're going to get harassed, you're going to get called names. I've been called all sorts of names. It's sort of like when you grow up as a kid in like a town that's, very conservative, very white, and very, like, I guess, American compared to your family. Like, no, calling you names just doesn't, it's off my back at this point, right, on Twitter. But, they try to take away the block, Twitter's corporate board, and they're like all white men. I think they had just gotten a woman on the board. And Zolina Maxwell did a whole campaign around Restore the Block and why. It was #RestoreTheBlock. Like, because I don't deserve to be stalked and harassed because of the things I say online. Like, women were just citing their different experiences, like what people had said, and screenshotting what, like, these abusive things that, being stalked. And so overnight, Twitter, of course, saw it, the Twitter executives, and they restored the block. So these are things that are very effective from social campaigning. And so you can either use it to make people aware, or you can use it to have, like, complement it with an action going on the ground. Like, we'll probably be doing stuff around the election, like, #importance of voting or whatever it is for young people, and at the same time doing voter registration work and turnout work on the ground.
Absolutely. And I think, for me personally, one of the things that I really loved about online feminism is how approachable it was for me, for someone who lived in a small conservative community halfway across the world and was really sort of exploring feminism and trying to figure out, different theories, different ideas around what it meant. And the fact that I could read all of this wonderful theory and hear from all these wonderful activists who were both doing work online and in their communities, and that was transcending borders and boundaries. I mean, it's a way to sort of ignite a conversation and really hear things from different perspectives. And I think that brings a richness to our conversation and our activism that can sometimes be missing when you're sort of insular and coming from the same communities and having the same perspectives. So certainly for me, it was instrumental in shaping me as a feminist today. So I'm a big fan of Twitter.
I think it now where it's like the conference is just a couple of days after the anniversary of Wendy Davis. Like, I mean, I think we would have all known in some capacity if we watched the news that this was happening.
Right.
But I mean, because it got so much, I mean, it was going on Twitter for 12 hours,
Right.
just about from the start till almost the news picked it up at night. And then finally, like, Barack Obama tweeted, you know, there's something special happening in Austin. And it was like 8 o'clock that night or something. It had been going on since the morning. So, you know, I mean, it was amazing to kind of watch this thing that was just sort of isolated and happening just in Texas, then spread on Twitter, then spread to Facebook. And I have friends in like Alaska or Mom and Young Dems in Minnesota being like, why am I turning on the TV to watch the Texas House proceedings? I have no idea, but something's great happening. And getting people really mobilized around that and the energy around that, I think was amazing. And it's allowed people, Twitter has allowed and Facebook has allowed, but definitely Twitter has allowed people who otherwise wouldn't have a voice in this movement to be very prominent in what they say.
And I think also it sort of opens up that if you're a curious person and you see, oh my God, this is happening in Texas, what else is going on out there? It sort of creates that educational moment of learning about sort of the challenges that exist, not just in this one place, but even within your own state that you may not have known about.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Okay, so we are actually just coming up on time, and we had actually talked about doing a Q&A with our audience. So if anyone has any questions,
That was too fast.
I know. We've had a wonderful conversation, but we're happy to take any questions if anyone has any. Oh, if you actually want to come up to the mics, do we have any mics up here? Feel free to come right up, and I'll just point you out and call on you. You get to be in charge. It's always fun. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much. What are you doing as young feminists to help out your local candidates? Not just the, of course, state and governorship, but the real local ground roots candidates, city commission, charter review board. Are you coming up with anything that can get that process a little bit better on social media?
Yeah, so for me, I have started this organization. I have time to do when I'm no longer president, which is Women Lead Virginia, and it's just to encourage younger women to think about public service and to think about getting involved in their communities, because that usually leads to women running for a city council, county board, get on county commissions, et cetera. In regards to elections, I am too involved in my local elections because I really do believe the political is personal. And I very much do believe that, especially at the local level. So I live in Arlington. Some of you may know, if you know Virginia at all, that was the congressional district of Jim Moran, who just retired this year. So he had a knock him out, drag him out race to replace the Democratic nominee for that area. And we've had county board and school board elections. What's very frustrating is in a very progressive, overly educated community, as Arlington is right outside of DC, it was still very much of a white guy show for replacing Jim as the Democratic nominee. And that's very frustrating. So, trying to very much go down to the local level and work with younger women candidates who are thinking of running and getting them trained and getting them ready to run is sort of what I've been focusing on a little bit. Hope to do more full-time when I'm done. So.
For us, we don't deal in elections specifically, but personally, I've just been helping people fundraise, encouraging people to run. I think that's a big part of the work, is not just dealing with whatever election is right in front of you, but sort of pipelining, lots of young women who can come in and start thinking about the process. And even some of our youth, they have plans to run 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So at least getting it in their mind that they can do it and sort of navigating the ways to go about doing it.
I forgot also to add that Young Dems were doing a candidate training this summer and a campaign training for our younger candidates who are thinking of running or either just working campaigns to get them thinking about the process. So it's very much a part of what we do as an organization.
Well, I think I'm a little young to have them. But
Never too young.
but I mean, we do kind of get our members exposed to that whole like political side a little bit. Like recently, I think it was last year, we had our former mayor of Irvine, Beth Crom, come and talk about her experiences. So we just have kind of mentors, women who are in like leadership positions or political positions come and talk at our club so that they can kind of inspire the girls there and, you know, set the fire underneath them. So yeah.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. It looks like we have another question.
So first of all, thank you all for traveling to come here. I really appreciate that. It's been energizing for me to listen to you guys. I wanted to ask about microaggressions. And so, Isha, you used the term low-key sexism, and I would actually argue that there is no low-key sexism because it actually has health effects and economic effects and all kinds of, and it's microaggressions, basically. So I want to ask you, in your work or in your just social lives or home lives or whatever, like what kind of microaggressions are you seeing specifically women to women? Like how are women still holding other women down?
It's like complicated.
We have an hour.
From my personal perspective, as I've mentioned before, I'm from a fairly conservative community back home in Hong Kong, and there's still a lot of very gendered roles that men and women in our communities play. And I've sort of gotten backhanded compliments about the work that I do for now. Oh, that's so wonderful that you're doing that. You know, you're not planning on having a family, so of course this is great for you to do this. And I mean, yeah, I'll get comments like that, and I think, there's still a long way to go, but I think part of what is really important to me is that I have these conversations with everyone in our communities, the women, the men, and sort of talk to them coming from a perspective of where I understand that they're coming from and then working with them. I think when you're facing microaggressions from other women or even from people in your own communities, no matter their gender, meet them where they're at and go work from there, because if you can start that initial conversation and then you can work them over, because the fact is at the end of the day, equality makes sense. Social justice makes sense, and if you have enough of similar conversations over time, you can move people's minds, and I think that's really one of the ways I've approached it. And I've had some success, not so much, but at the end of the day, my parents are proud of me, and 10 years ago, that probably wouldn't have been the case. They would have expected me to be married and having kids by now, and while I'm certainly married, I don't have the kids yet, and they're okay with that. And 10 years ago, that wouldn't have been possible with my family. And so I think you start where you are, and you work within your own communities, and you see that spread, and you see that grow. And I think you'll all probably have similar experiences where that's how you make change, one step at a time.
Actually really agree with the whole, like, sometimes women can hold other women back thing. So at my school, one time we had basically this election thing where it was like athletic commissioners, and they basically just like kind of run all of the sports. And we have two, one for boys and one for girls. So like girls athletic commissioner and boys athletic commissioner. And it's a public election, or like a school-wide election. So like people, the average person who goes to my school can vote on who they want. And there is no, like, even though there's a boys athletic commissioner, there is no thing like only boys can run for boys athletic commissioner, only girls can run for girls athletic commissioner. But it's kind of implied, I guess. But this one guy, and there was no girls running for boys athletic commissioner, but there was one guy running for a girls athletic commissioner, and there was one girl running for girls athletic commissioner. And everyone kind of thought it was a joke that he was running because he's a guy. But the guy actually ended up winning. And later on, after the election, we were all talking about it, and then people were like, well, I didn't really vote for, the girl's name was Caitlin, but like, I didn't vote for Caitlin because I thought that she was just kind of like bossy, And
the other B word.
Yeah, so, and then I was like, in my head I was thinking, well, actually I was like, really? I didn't get that vibe from her, but in my head I was thinking, wait, but he's also like, isn't he also bossy? Like, isn't bossy just confident? I mean, like, she was just saying like what she was going to do, and I didn't get that vibe from her at all. She seemed really self-confident, and I think that put a lot of girls off, which is really surprising, actually really shocking. So I think like in our club, what we try to do is really bring up like prominent female figures. This is what we do sometimes when we have guest speakers come in, like Nadia Rayan and Beth Krom, who are bossy, I guess, you know, but who are successful and doing what they're doing well. So girls can kind of learn that it's okay to be like that, and that they don't have to bring other girls who are like that down. So, yeah.
One more question. We'll take your last question before we finish up.
The three of you are just amazing. We're over there Googling you, and holy crap, you're just awesome. From Utah, thank you. Can the three of you identify a particular feminist like role model or experience that was sort of the genesis of your feminist consciousness? Because we want to try to replicate that shit. Like
Wow, thank you. First, I want to definitely, before we close, say thank you to Terry for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here. It's, I've loved working with her and alongside now, and so to be here is a dream. For me, it's Angela Davis. Yeah. I can't even think of the moment that it sort of happened, but just learning about her and just, I don't know, like, it's so funny because I even have an uncle who calls me Angela. He calls me Angela because he's like, that's you, that's your personality. But I absolutely just love everything about her strength, her resilience, her commitment. I mean, I could go on and on, but for me, she is my role model.
This is going to be kind of funny, but I got three, sort of. I was just thinking. But yeah, I got kind of three, and it's sort of like when I was a kid, like, definitely dating me as a young feminist, but loved Madonna, like absolutely loved her. And the reason I loved her was because she was this woman who very much had her own career, was responsible for her constant reinventions over the decades, when people were saying, you know what, you cannot do that. You cannot take off your clothes like this. You cannot do this. You cannot do that. And she very much started that very much of a pro-sex feminism, in the sense of women are very much in control of their own destiny and their own bodies, and very much put that out there for a lot of young women to see. And just her brassiness and her being comfortable with dating whoever she wanted to date of any sort of rate. It was just sort of something you didn't see compared to all of the other women who sort of conformed. I love Hillary Clinton because Hillary Clinton. I saw as a kid watching her getting attacked for having an opinion as a first lady, to me, spoke a lot of volumes, and just how she handled that, and how she's continued to survive through her husband's affairs, and just, yeah, through her own political battles, and how she's constantly coming back. Like, you knock her down, she really does get back up, right? And that's a great role model for women. And finally, and I was just listening, I think it was her testimony I was hearing because it's the anniversary of Freedom Summer, Fannie Lou Hamer. Like, she's just, we talk about police brutality today, but when they're talking about all of her, she's giving the story about how they're all being brought into the different jails, and she's watching how her different colleagues and friends who she's been marching with and protesting with and registering people to vote with are literally going into a gauntlet of being beaten and coming out with their faces bleeding and eyes pulled out and everything. And she's talking about how she went in and experienced that and spoke truth to power. I wouldn't even be here as President of the Young Democrats of America if she didn't get up there at the National Democratic Convention in 1964 and say, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like, right? Like, I wouldn't even be here as an African American woman. And she I just hope that I can be as awesome and powerful as her. And most people don't know she was one of the original women who got in a room and said National Organization for Women should be here. So she's such a great role model.
I think my role model would probably be Malala, because She's incredibly wise beyond her years, and also because she is a feminist completely, but she's also not, she is who she is, you know? She's not hiding her ethnicity or her religion, and she still wears a headscarf, but she's basically saying, yeah, I wear the headscarf, so what? You know, I'm still a feminist. And I really admire her bravery also, you know, like she got shot in the head, but she did not let that, you know, she did not let what happened to her control her, and she still continued to keep voicing her message. So, yeah, very inspirational.
All right, well, that's all we have time for today, but thank you so much for all of you for joining us, and thank you to Janae and Atima and Isha. It's been a wonderful panel.